The next question was submitted by the Ojai Valley Green Coalition, and you have, gentlemen, 1 minute to answer. With the exception of the housing element, the city's general plan is significantly out of date. Do you agree or disagree updating the conservation element should be the next priority, and why? When the conservation element is updated, would you support adding the night sky as a resource and be included in the city's master environmental assessment inventory? Let's change it around a little bit. Mr. Lara, would you like to start first on this question?
Yes. So it is pretty much outdated, the general plan for the city of Ojai. I was actually on the council when we decided to update the housing element. I was actually the swing vote. So I would, in general, look to update the conservation element or any other element. I think that adding the night sky, I've been a big fan, and I've seen the importance of implementing our night sky ordinance, because it not only helps us with the security of Ojai, but it also helps our habitat, and that's extremely important. And then the beauty of watching your stars. I mean, who doesn't want? We live in the city. I think that would be an important addition to that element, along with so many others. We have to start thinking about implementing environmental issues into our general plan. When I was on council, I was big on the sustainability plan that was on there. Was unsuccessful to get it top priority, but I think that needs to be included in most of our elements.
Thank you, Mr. Lara. Mr. Haney?
So as it's already noted, our general plan is completely outdated. I think the housing element's probably the most updated part of our documents. The conservation plan, clearly demonstrates or clearly expresses what we're trying to achieve as a community, and so updating it based on the fact that it was written in, I think, 1990 something. I mean, it's very, very old. So that's technically, or that is just a no-brainer. It should be done. As far as the night sky ordinance, I'll be honest with you. When that first went through, I scratched my head, because I live in Ojai, and we live in a dark space, and I do see stars. And I wasn't sure what the element or what the whole idea behind it was. I'm being honest here. And it wasn't until, in fact, Pat McPherson and I went round and round on it initially, because I didn't quite understand it. But I'll tell you what, it has been a benefit for our community, and it is something that we sell to anyone that comes into our space. The fact that you can go out and actually see stars at night, where...
Thank you, Mr. Haney. Big half moon out there tonight, too. Mr. Wyrick, you're next.
In terms of whether that element should be updated, first, I'm not so sure about that, because as I alluded to already, the most dated part of our general plan is something called the Master Environmental Assessment, 1987, and that is referred to by various elements in our general plan. It's not just part of one element. So I'm thinking that might be the first thing that we have to do if we approach this thing systematically, and then start looking at what's the, after that, what's oldest for updating first, unless there's a significant need. We got a lot of issues in the city, and the conservation element is extremely important, but I think we want to do that smart and systematically, use our money well. Finally, on the night sky, absolutely, I think it's been a wonderful benefit to the community. It's sporadically enforced, and to address concerns that a number of senior citizens have, it doesn't mean that we can't light the pedestrian path of travels. It means we use proper lighting, well-designed lighting, so that people still are encouraged to walk, and even at night, and we don't want to forget that.
Thank you, Mr. Wyrick. Mr. Blatz?
I kind of don't want to reiterate everything that everybody else has said, but I'm in kind of agreement. The general plan and the various elements of the general plan need to be looked at. Some are very old. Not every part needs to necessarily be updated, and it's not a task that is lightly done. It's a very complicated, comprehensive, expensive process that the only other problem is you have to prioritize the need for that with all the other needs that we have in the city. The conservation plan obviously could be updated. There's so many significant differences in Ojai. since part of that was kind of contemplated. But the night sky element, I think, is actually important. As long as it doesn't interfere with safety and security of people in our town. I am an astronomy guy, and I think it's great that we have a community that, just as during the day, our community is unique and different, and the way we handle managing what businesses and how we conduct our business in Ojai is different than other locales. At night, we should be a little bit different too, and I think the night sky ordinance helps enforce that.
Thank you, Mr. Blatz. Mr. Johnston?
Not a topic that one can answer in 1 minute, but if I can, I'll say yes. I think we do need to look at that. I think we do need to look at the general plan of the city for a lot of reasons, and conservation is one. The open space, the recreation element, the housing element, which we're proud of the fact that we have visited it most recently, but there are a number of issues that have now arisen that we have to go back and take a look at to be sure that it is in balance with the other elements and be sure that they are in support of our housing element. It's a daunting task. It hasn't been done since the late 80s, but if we're going to take another look at our land use, we got to first take a look at our general plan, because the land use or the zoning has to comply with our general plan, and there are a number of things about housing and other issues that affect water that we should be incorporating and discussing with the community at large.
Thank you, Mr. Johnston. And the next question, which is submitted by the Sierra Club, relates to the Los Padres National Forest behind Ojai. Legislation is currently before Congress to increase federal protection for lands within the Los Padres National Forest surrounding Ojai, including additional protections in the Matillahall Canyon and Matillahall Creek areas, and also federal lands in the Lake Casitas watershed. Some of those lands were former ranch lands of my family. My childhood home is there. A little personal note, but this is not a history night. And also Forest Service lands in the upper Sespe Creek region. Do you agree or disagree that the City of Ojai should officially support the Central Coast Heritage Protection Act, and why? Mr. Blatz, would you start us off?
Well, I think that this is a no-brainer. With the current climate, and I shouldn't say climate, with the current political administration and some of their policies towards the environment and towards our local environment and some of these specific areas, because not all of them are directly in our backyard. This act would cover a number of different areas, but in general, it provides a level of additional protection that really I would have hoped wasn't necessary. I mean, this isn't something that in the last administration in Washington, D.C., this was something that anybody needed to put together. So it's kind of frustrating that we're even having to waste time and discuss this. But under the current conditions we have, I think it's absolutely a wonderful act, and I think it's a no-brainer that the City Council should support it.
Thank you, Mr. Blatz. Mr. Wyrick?
Yes, we should support it, of course, and it's as important for protection of our watershed as anything else. It's extremely important. So there's a selfish interest there, but also to be the more fundamental. The idea that we have to have the special legislation to carve out the idea of extraction industries operating in wilderness and protected areas is again, as Mr. Blatch just said, it's kind of unfortunate in the extreme. I looked at the sponsors on this bill, 25 Democrats. Whatever happened to Republicans with a small c that were in favor of conservation? I don't know. What happened to them? The point I'm trying to make here is that this is an important piece of legislation. Unfortunately, it hasn't moved since it was published in 2017, but all of us at the grassroots could help start to make it move. We ought to try to do it.
Thank you, Mr. Wyrick. Mr. Haney?
So it's pretty simple. It just should be yes, yes, and more yeses. Anything in your backyard, if you're not willing to protect it, why have it in your backyard? I can't expand any greater on it than that. If you don't believe in your environment, you don't believe in protecting it, and you don't believe that we have a lunatic in office that's doing everything that he can to destroy the environment in this country, I can't help you. But it's a yes, yes, and another yes.
Thank you, Mr. Haney. Mr. Lara?
I couldn't agree more with the three council or the three previous speakers about obviously supporting this bill, doing anything possible. And I agree with Bill on this mostly because it protects our watershed. I mean, we're not connected to state water. We got to figure out ways to protect our water security. The second reason is our view shed. I mean, we pride ourselves in our surrounding valley. It's more than just land, habitats. There's a spirituality about being in this valley. It's about being in tune with who we are in Ojai. So I think that we should do anything possible to try to protect our surroundings and figure out ways to enjoy this more. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lara. Mr. Johnston? Mr. Johnston?